The Bible reading today, most appropriately, is from Psalm 139. You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand on me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go to the mountains, you are. If I go to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn and settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me and the light become night around me, even the darkness will be not dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. For you created my innermost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you. If only you, God, would slay the wicked. Away from me, you who are bloodthirsty. They speak of you with evil intent. Your adversaries misuse your name. Do I not hate those who hate you, Lord, and abhor those who are in rebellion against you? I have nothing but hatred for them. I count them my enemies. Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Is that your life? Living in the conscious awareness of the presence of God? Well, we have been in conscious awareness of the presence of God this morning. And most of us here would say, yes, I live that to some degree or another. And so I'm not talking today about anything necessarily new for us. But I am wanting to reflect on this living in the conscious awareness of the presence of God, because it is something that you and I can grow in. There are many aspects to our human life that have limits and have caps on them, right? You know, at some point you stop growing taller and you start growing shorter as your discs in your back compress. Some of us never stop growing wider. That's true. But at some point you will reach peak physical fitness, peak physical agility, all of those sorts of things, and then there'll be a cap on it. And at some point you'll notice, like, you'll start out with no hair, and then you'll get lots of hair, and then some of us will be reversing the trend. And Paul said, outwardly I am wasting away. And after you've reached your full human physical stature, to some degree or another, you are wasting away, right? You are getting old, you are getting wrinkly, things are starting to wear out. All of that is true for you and me. But Paul said, although I am outwardly, I'm wasting away, inwardly I am being renewed day by day. There is no limit to growth in your spiritual experience with God. So if you think you've got none or very little, great news for you. There's plenty of scope for you to grow in living in the presence of God. And if you think, yes, well, I've been following Jesus for a long period of time, I think I've got all there is. All there is to know in terms of, or experience in terms of living in the presence of God. I just want to read a couple of testimonies here. One is from Brother Lawrence. My soul so overflowed with joy that I was forced to moderate it. And sometimes I said to God, "It is enough, Lord, it is enough." Like, there's too much of your presence, God, please tone it down. Has that been your experience yet? Well, that was his experience. He said, I went on to say, I could not bear any more. I felt that I would die if I did not restrain this abundance. Well, Frank Laubach says this, I feel simply carried along each hour, doing my part in a plan which is far beyond myself. This sense of cooperation with God in little things is what so astonishes me, for I have never felt this way before. I need something to turn around to find it waiting for me. I must work and I find a quietness in which to do it. I must write letters and I find the words blocked out as I write them. I have never written to my Father before without great effort, but this time it just flowed out almost without thought. God is so close and so amazingly lovely that I feel like melting all over with a strange and blissful contentment. He is just behind everything. I feel him there. He is just under my hand, just under the typewriter, just behind this desk. I feel him in each thing I touch, in each person I meet, in each event I turn to face. On the hillside yesterday, I felt God so intensely that I thought I might break out with the joy of it. The whole landscape seemed alive with his presence. I could scarcely contain the delight. And I don't mean a vague sense of his being near. I mean literally that I talked with God and he responded. It was not imagination. It was a presence so real that I could feel him beside me, could almost see him. I remember looking at the trees and thinking, they could not have been so beautiful yesterday. Everything shimmered with glory. Even now, as I write about it, I tremble. What a God. What a lover of our souls. I want that. Do you want that? You see, it wasn't just someone 3,000 years ago that wrote a psalm about living in the presence of God. That was people in the last few hundred years, and Frank Laubach was in the middle of the last century. So it wasn't just something back, for people in Bible times. Now, some of you who are a bit more scientifically minded might say, well, David, don't you know how big the universe is? Don't you know how vast the universe is? Don't you know how old the universe is? How could God, if there is a God, how could God possibly be with me? Like, that might have been okay for them back then when they were, they only thought the world was this big and God was really close and all that sort of stuff. But I just find it really hard to accept that that might be real today. But here's the thing. This universe is more mysterious than you and I probably realise. And so I'm going to nerd out with a bit of physics for you. Who's heard of neutrinos? Some of you have. Neutrinos are subatomic particles. They've existed forever because they're produced in suns and supernovas and all sorts of places. But we only had a theory about them in the 1950s, and they only had built detectors for them in the last 30 or 40 years. Some of them are like these big cubes of ice or other materials that are buried deep underground so that they're not disturbed by any other sort of particles. And every now and again a flash goes off because a neutrino happens to interact with it. Because neutrinos are very lightweight. We don't know exactly their weight. Some people thought for a while they had no weight at all, and they travel at close to the speed of light. Now, I want you to guess how many neutrinos might be passing through your body right at this moment. 2,554,500,000. I feel like I'm on The Price is Right and say, higher. So, 20 billion, higher. 20 trillion, higher. So, the calculation is that every second through your body is flowing 1 quadrillion neutrinos. So you went from 1,000 to 1,000,000 to 1,000,000,000 to 1,000,000,000,000 to quadrillion. It's 1 with 15 zeros after it. Yeah? Every second, and most of those are coming from the sun, but some of them are coming from supernovas way off in some other place in the universe. And it doesn't matter, during the night it still happens too, because when our side of the earth is facing away from the sun, it doesn't matter, the neutrinos just zoom straight through the earth and then straight through you. 1 quadrillion every second. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, that's 2 quadrillion already, 3 Mississippi. Like, it's bananas to think that we live in a universe where that many billion, trillion, quadrillion particles are flowing through you every second, right? Some from the far reaches of the universe. We live in a mysterious universe. It's such an amazingly mysterious universe. It's not a stretch to expect that these sort of things, these spiritual experiences, this God could also be behind it. Brother Lawrence said, "The greatest satisfaction I can imagine is to find myself united with God, to be so habitually in his presence that I live as if there were none but he and I in the world." So how do we get there? How do we grow to those sort of world pulsing with God's glory moments? Those experiences of God, you being with God so intensely. How might we get to those places?
Pray.
Yeah. So, the thing to think about is to reflect on, where am I now? Think about this. If you, in your busy lives, happen to have a moments of quiet, where does your mind automatically turn? Is it to the to-do list that your spouse has given you? Is it to something that you've been meaning to do and never got around to doing and you still feel guilty because you haven't? Is it to your football team? Because we're now trying to get down to the nitty-gritties of living in the presence of God. Where does our attention go by default? When we have a few moments space, what do we tend to think about? Where does our attention tend to go? Now, I was trying to list a few things that might be our experience in our minds most of the time. And you know, preachers have got to go for alliteration, so I'm coming up with words that begin with C, right? So some of us, our minds are cluttered, right? There's just so many things jumbling in there, like we've got so many different responsibilities, so many different things going on. It's just our minds are cluttered the whole time. And even if we're physically stopped for a minute, there's just clutter, clutter, clutter everywhere, right? Some of us are consumed. Like we just get buried in something. Like I'm trying to work out some computer programming issue and I just get buried in that and everything else gets left by the wayside. Or maybe it's gardening or sewing or some other thing or work that you just get consumed with. And maybe that's more your thing. It's not so much your mind is cluttered, it's just that your mind is so consumed with something, it just forces everything else out. Maybe your mind is just crunched. there's health issues going on, relational issues going on, conflicts, lack, worries, whatever else, and your mind just feels like it's crunched the whole time. Yeah. Or maybe you're just cruising. The sort of cliched question when the wife asks the husband, what's on your mind? Nothing much. And that's the truth. Much to the surprise of the person asking the question. No, that actually is the truth. No, what do you think about nothing much? I'm not hiding it. I'm not just literally, there's nothing much. I'm just cruising. But then sometimes if you're cluttered or consumed or crushed or even cruising, sometimes you just collapse. Yeah. Now you can probably generate some other C words that try and describe your inward state, right? And if I was a psychologist or a therapist and you're consumed, crushed or cluttered, I might suggest you need to practice some mindfulness. Has anyone ever heard that suggestion before? And mindfulness is really around sort of taking a step out of yourself and just noticing what's actually going on without judgment. Oh, I am worried. I am thinking about that thought over and over again. Oh, there is a pain in my back. Oh, the sun is warm. I'm not just being mindfully aware of my present moment. Yeah? And there is some value to that. But secular therapists can only tell you to go for that. But we as Christians know that you can start with mindfulness and you can get to Godfulness. Is that a word? I've just started a new word. Godfulness, right? The world practices mindfulness. We've got to practice Godfulness. Yeah. And we can get there through mindfulness, you see. Because when we become mindfully aware of the world around us, we are aware that this is a world that's permeated with the glory of God. It's like someone with a beautiful perfume has walked through the room and left the scent. And we see the world around us not just as an inanimate thing, but it's a place that's permeated by God's glory. And then we might notice that there's a person. And then we recall that that person is made in the image of God. In some way, that person, however good or bad they are, reflects the reality of God into this universe. And then if you're a mindfulness expert, you become aware of your breathing. And if you're going for Godfulness, you know that breath and spirit are the same words in Hebrew. And your breath can remind you of the presence of the breath of God, the Spirit of God. And we can go. It may be just in those moments, from the clutter to the mindfulness, to the Godfulness. And the trick is not to think somehow I've got to instantaneously become Brother Lawrence level experience of God on a day-to-day basis, or Frank Laubach experience of God on a day-to-day basis, or Hannah Whitehall Smith, or any of Julian of Norwich, or any of the other people who are famous for having had this interactive, intense experience with God on a moment-by-moment basis. They didn't get there instantaneously. Brother Lawrence said, I was working at it for like 4 years until it became my regular practice. And he would say, well, the presence of God is so real to me, it's no different whether I'm in the church service or I'm in the kitchen scrubbing pans. It's just as joyful, just as present, just as holy. That didn't happen for him overnight. And it probably won't happen overnight for us too. But it will happen. If we step into the reality of God who is already here. If we make it our aim to be Godful. Psalm 23 describes the with God life. And it talks about God us lying down in green pastures and being by quiet waters and God restoring our soul. Oh, that's all nice and lovely and God. But it also talks about when I'm walking through the darkest valley, that God is with me. And it also talks about when I'm in the presence of my enemies, actually God has put on a feast and a banquet for me. You see, so sometimes we think that being in the presence of God our life's got to be under control. We've got to be in a good place. We've got to be in a happy place. No, being in the presence of God is in any place and time that you happen to find yourself in. Are you in the waiting room in the hospital? Are you at the bedside of someone who is dying? Are you nervously going into a job interview? Are you about to play a sporting game? In all of these places are places to which is pregnant with the possibility of living in the presence of God. Your life doesn't have to become perfect before you begin to step into it. It doesn't have to become under control before you've had, I've just got to deal with all this sort of stuff and then I get to you, God. Hannah Whitall Smith said this. I was very much helped many years ago by the following sentence in a book by Adelaide Proctor. For one look at self, take 10 looks at Christ. It was entirely contrary to all I had previously thought right, but it carried conviction to my soul and delivered me from a habit of morbid self-examination and introspection that had made my life miserable for years. It was an unspeakable deliverance. To my experience since leads me to believe that an even better motto would be, take no look at self, but look only and always at Christ. The psalmist says, my eyes are ever towards the Lord, for he shall pluck my feet out of the net. And that's from Psalm 25, verse 15. As long as our eyes are towards our own feet and towards the net in which they are entangled, we only get into worse tangles. But when we keep our eyes towards the Lord, he plucks our feet out of the net. This is a point in practical experience that I have tested hundreds of times. I know it is a fact. No matter what sort of snarl I may have been in, whether inward or outward, I have always found that while I kept my eyes on the snarl and tried to unravel it, it grew worse and worse. But when I turned my eyes away from the snarl, and kept them fixed on the Lord, he always, sooner or later, unravelled it and delivered me. You see, taking steps towards Godfulness can start in the midst of the messiness. In fact, that's probably the best place to start. Psalm 16 is a psalm that's quoted in the New Testament describing, as pointing and describing something about Jesus. But there is also this wisdom in Psalm 16, verse 8. I keep my eyes always on the Lord. Wow. I keep my eyes always on the Lord. With him at my right hand, I will not be shaken. Therefore my heart is glad and my tongue rejoices. My body will also rest secure. Wow. I keep my eyes always on the Lord. That's what Paul did. He recommended in Colossians chapter 3, verse 1. Since then you have been raised with Christ. Set your hearts on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things, for you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. You see, Dallas Willard says the first and most basic thing we can and must do is keep God before our minds. This is a fundamental secret of caring for our souls. Have you ever had the experience in your life of trying to learn to do something and it was really hard and maybe you stuffed it up all the time? But then you reached a point where it became automatic. For many of us, one of those things might be driving. And you remember when you were first learning to drive and you were bunny hopping down the road or whatever else you're doing. But now, you can be multitasking while you drive. In fact, you can be so unconsciously competent that you can drive yourself to places you weren't intending to go. Because you're thinking about something else and you just drive automatically down that way rather than going actually the way you want to go, right? You can get to a point where it's an automatic thing. And that's the encouraging thing for you and me. It might seem like I only ever really focus on God when I'm in church on Sundays. But let me tell you, the experience of the saints from the Old Testament to the New Testament to today is that we can begin to develop this habitual turning our mind to God. Turning our mind to God. And you might think, well, then I just end up with my head in the clouds all the time and I'm no earthly good to anybody. But that was not Frank Laubach's experience. His experience was that, no, it infused the activities, whether it's typing or whatever else that he was doing, it infused those things with the presence of God. It transformed them in some deep and profound way. Thomas Kelly said, "There is a way of ordering our mental life on more than one level at once. On one level, we can be thinking, discussing, seeing, calculating, meeting all the demands of external affairs, but deep within, behind the scenes, at a profounder level, we may also be in prayer and adoration and song and worship and a gentle receptiveness to the divine breathings." Practicing the presence of God is not about making us so heavenly minded so that we're no earthly use. It's so that we're so heavenly minded that we can bring heaven to earth around us. And just like learning to ride a bike or play the piano required practice and intentionality, what's sometimes called the spiritual disciplines or the spiritual practices are things that help us get to there. Like coming to services and worshipping God helps us focus on God. Having a prayer time in the morning and or the evening, or memorising scripture or going for a walk or solitude or fasting are all sorts of things that can help us grow to the point where we live in a moment by moment awareness of the loving presence of Jesus with us. They are not ends in themselves. The reason you do those things is it helps you get to live the sort of life that the psalmist described, that Paul described, that Frank Laubach and Hannah Whitehall Smith and Thomas Kelly and countless other people have experienced. And as we come to Christmas, which is the ultimate revelation that God is with us in the incarnation, let's be inspired to say, yes, God, I want to live more like Brother Lawrence. I want to live so in your presence, God, that I sometimes have to tell you to dial it down a bit because it's just getting a bit overwhelming. But Lord, I do want to have those experiences where it's like the world is shimmering with your glory and that I'm doing stuff with you, just not in my own strength. That the words are flowing, that the actions are going, that the interactions are somehow different. God, I want to live in this presence of God. Think about what's a simple practice that you can do to try and increase the amount that happens for you. Like when you wake up in the morning, what's your first thought? Well, determine that it's going to be God. When you go to bed at night, what's your last thought? Determine that it's going to be God. When you stop to have some food, quietly pray, Jesus, be my daily bread. When you see someone and you're reminded they're made in the image of God, thank you, God, that you're with me. When you breathe in, thank you, God, that you're with me. When you see the birds or the sky, thank you, God, that your glory surrounds me. When you're you're going into a task, Jesus, I want you to be with me doing this task with me. I don't want to do it alone. Experiment with what works for you. This is not about there's one secret formula or some religious duty you have to perform. No, it's about finding the things that work in your life at this time of your own life, whether you're a young child or whether you're a crazy parent or whether you've never been married or whether you're retired or whatever it is. There is scope for you to grow in the experience of the presence of God. Dallas Willard said, and I've said this before, he grew more in his knowledge of God in the last year of his life than ever before. There's no cap. It's not like you reach your 40s and then it's a slow decline from there. No. Outwardly, you might be wasting away, but inwardly we can be renewed day by day by day by day and live in the presence of the God who created a universe where 1 quadrillion neutrinos are passing through your body every second. You might be thinking that the songs we've been singing today have been very appropriate for what I've been talking about, and they are. But that was just God telling Elsie for us to sing. It wasn't me telling Elsie what songs to sing today. And most appropriately, this closing song is, "Take my life and let it be consecrated, Lord, to thee." And so let's use this song as another stepping stone to living more and more consciously aware of being in the presence of our loving God. Let's stand together and sing.